Hey, this is Davin with Hagerty and our Redline rebuild update. Today I'm going to give you a brief overview of where we're at on the Cadillac engine and on the Trail 70. We have the Cadillac motor completely tore down, as you've seen, and now I'm going through and trying to understand what all the pieces and parts are. So as a for instance, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but for instance the lifters have a crazy little dish in them. So obviously lifters will need to be replaced. And the camshaft has been sent out to be reground or freshened up. I have a brand new water pump, which I was really surprised to actually find. So a brand new water pump to go in. And then I'm going through all the pieces and kind of separating them out as far as how they get refurbished. So for instance, I have, some items in here. The pulleys, I'll have them powder coated. I'll have the water neck powder coated. This big bracket, the bracket for the generator, the reservoir, fill reservoir for the power steering pump, and the power steering pump body. I was not able to buy a kit for that, but for the pump itself, I have that sent out. So that's in process between, leaving here and coming back at some point. Now, on some of our nuts and bolts of things, stuff that I'm going to reuse, stuff I'm not going to reuse, I'll go through and clean them. Now I'm going to use these as an example on this. So these are just the push rods, but of course all push rods get like a baked on oil just from age and being in the engine, getting hot. So what I did with these is I did put them in I ran them through the parts washer, got them pretty well degreased, but then I took and put them in this tumbler. And what the tumbler does, it takes these little pieces of little stainless rods, right? You put your part into it, and then of course it rolls on this mechanism with a motor, and it just sits there and tumbles around and bombards the part, for all intents and purposes, with not only other parts, because you put more than one in, but also those little stainless rods, and it polishes them up really nice, and they come out nice and clean and ready to go into the assembly. And of course you want to dry them off because you don't want them to rust after that. And then I've went through and did the same thing, like with, in this case, the dampener, the splash or the oil slinger. And then again, these are the bolts relative to the rocker shafts. So next step, as a for instance, on this rocker shaft, I went through and degreased it with the best that the big parts washer will do, but this stuff is baked on pretty good. What I'll do, because they're small pieces, I'm actually going to put them into our ultrasonic, which runs at 75 degrees C, and it will melt the rest of this off. They'll be nice and clean from an oil standpoint and baked on oil standpoint, but then I'm also going to throw them in the tumbler. Second on these, before I forget, these rocker shafts all have a tendency to, the rocker arms all have a tendency to get a groove bore into them, and this is from the end of the valve stem pushing up on them, so there's a noticeable groove on pretty much every one of them. So when these are off and cleaned up, I'll take and have them reground, that surface reground, so that'll clean that aspect of things up. I have I'll rebuild both the oil pump and the fuel pump, both of which, of course, those kits are on back order, so not exactly sure when we'll have those, but hopefully it won't hold us up any. But again, we're moving everything else forward. So as you know, the block, the crank, the heads are all out to their respective machine shops, and that's going. Anything that's going to get painted the same color as the engine, I'm just sandblasting, and we can roll over here and take a peek at our resident sandblaster, and you'll see that he is hard at work, concentrating on sandblasting and doing an impeccable job, I might add. Now, if you've ever sandblasted before, you might say, well, is he doing an impeccable job, or is he doing an impeccable job because you're not doing it? And I'll just say, yes, that is 100% correct. Both. So, next is our Trail 70. So I took a trip down to Trail Buddy in Zeeland, Michigan, and spent the afternoon with them and went through all kinds of history and information as far as what makes a 74 and not a 69 and not a 82. And I'll tell you, my mind was like exploding with all that information. So with that, we've already purchased a good portion of the parts that we're going to need. You know, as a for instance, we have fresh clutch plates, we have a rebuild kit for the stator. That's kind of one of those, while you're there, let's just get this done. New brake shoes, tubes, tires are on order. Some chrome, a couple little chrome pieces that we could get that were readily available. So this happens to be an OE piece, which you can see it's absolutely gorgeous. This is the engine guard. We have fresh sprockets. We have a new battery already, and all that. So as I'm gone through all these parts, I'm again putting together a basket relative to what's going to be rechromed. So the shifter, the brake, and the shifter, and all that, we're going to rechrome that. And then other items like this. This holds the handlebars in place, but this is an aluminum piece. So I'm going to send this out in the same Jason's Chrome that I'm going to send all the chroming stuff to. He does all our polishing as well and does a phenomenal job. So he'll polish the aluminum, get stuff re-chromed. Like, you know, this particular piece, this is the, I'll call it the intake manifold for lack of a better word. This is aluminum, and we'll polish that, and it'll be nice and shiny as well, refurbished. We haven't determined exactly how we're going to go about getting to our final product on the side covers, but the idea is still to do a media blast this in some fashion. It might be the vapor hone, and then do Cerakote on top of that, so it's nice and clean and durable. It'll last its look longer. And then of course we have, you know, the main carcass. We've stripped off all the, I should say Ben has stripped off all the tags on it for me, so that's nice. And with exception of this chrome piece, it's ready for sandblast. We want to wash it first, but we'll sandblast it, and then we're going to do all the body work up here, and then take that down to Trail Buddy, and they're going to do apply all the paint, that tri-stage paint. And then at this end we have our wheels. I've already went through and broke these loose. They advised highly to take them and put them on a machine and break these loose, the bead wise, and then unbolt them, because otherwise you'll be fighting to get you might break the bead or take the bolts out, but the bead will be stuck to the rim, and it'll be a pain to get them off when you don't have any leverage, basically. So process wise, that was an interesting thing. These are a tubed tire, and they're a split rim, but not a split rim like an old pickup truck. So hubs will get same treatment basically that we decide on as far as the you know, vapor hone or sandblasting, and then Cerakote. So yeah, and then the rims are steel, so I will blast these up. I'm going to see how they look. If they're too terribly pitted, there are brand new ones available, but I'd like to reuse the ones I have. But if they're horribly pitted and powder coat won't look right, then I'll just get some new ones. But I'm going to try to salvage these. I think we can be pretty close, if nothing else. Now, if you're sending stuff out, I highly advise taking a photo of what you're sending out, so you have some documentation for yourself to say, I sent this, this, and this is what it looked like. Because, you know, if you're sending it to a shop that does a lot of work on different things, you know, this probably doesn't mean anything to them as far as what it is. And when you call and say, hey, where's this or that, they'll be like, eh. So tomorrow, we're going to roll over to Thirlby's. We got the call from Joey. He said, hey, I can squeeze you in and get you out of here, is really what he's after, but that's just between us. And we're going to get over there and get our block washed, baked, washed, tumbled, all that process. Same thing with the heads, getting everything completely tore down. And with any luck, by the end of that, we're going to have enough time also to get that board, because pistons should be here. Should be here. So that's where we're at. Couple things going on, nothing too crazy. It's all fun. All right, so I have the head up here on the workbench for Chris, and he's gonna come through and he's gonna pull out the freeze plugs and of course the studs, and then completely disassemble and yank the springs and valves and everything out. And that's when we can get a good initial look at least what the seats look like. We know we're gonna put hardened exhaust seats in it just to be done with it. And then maybe, the intakes will have to be freshened, but hopefully they don't have to be replaced. And then what kind of condition the valves themselves are in. But after that, we have that to get through, obviously the other head as well. And then I'll show you the exhaust manifold. And as many of you have already commented, the exhaust manifold has a crack in it, which we saw as well.
Tempting fate here walking backwards.
Yep. They did a nice job cleaning the aisles for you. So here's our two exhaust manifolds. And you can see if I've already went through and cleaned off all that nasty casting flange and that's on here, the slag. So that's all cleaned up on that edge. But here's our crack. Basically from heat over time, it's cracked. Basically from here to here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through and we'll do in our next update, after these are all nice and blasted, we'll go through an update and show you how we're gonna fix that. So we have a process in mind. We've done some research. I have never actually welded up a set of cast iron manifolds, so that'll be a first for me. So I'll walk you through the process that I'm going to attempt, and we'll see how that works. From here, I'm going to leave the parts with them. They're going to run through the bake, clean, and blast process. And quite frankly, I got to get back over to the shop and keep the rest of the project moving along. So I got some stuff to get shipped out. So I will see you later on this afternoon when they're done through the bake, and then we can really inspect the parts from a mag and what are mics and all that type of stuff. So see you. Well, we're back over here at Thirlby's, and the block is all cleaned up. It's out of the tumbler, it's cooled down, and now Chris is going to go through and we're going to crack check the deck surface, see if we have any issues there. We're not expecting any, but we certainly want to know for sure. So again, this uses a magnet passing current here, and then the powder is a ferrous powder, and it'll collect in the gap. So the verdict is we have a good block to work with. There's no cracks that we're finding, at least at this point. We've checked the mains and the webs and the sides of the block as far as around the freeze plugs and the water jacket, if you will, externally. Also on the deck surface, and then of course down the lifter valley as well. So we got a clean bill of health relative to the crack side of things. Block is cleaned up. It is ready to go over. I'll take it over and have Mikey look it over, give us a verdict on where we'll be at with pistons. The presumption is 30 over will clean this up, no problem. But that's at least what my preliminary bore check has done. We'll let the professional on that side of things look it over as well. And but one thing I want to show you before is the manifold we're just about done with in the tumbler. So we want to see how bad that crack really is. If it goes up into that flange, it just changes how far we have to repair it is all. But so we're going to do that next. Sweet, they turn into big block heads. Awesome. That'll work. Cracks running from the gasket surface down here. I just want to see how far it goes, if it goes up into here or not. Yeah, it looks like it stops right here. I mean, clearly down, and it disappears right about there. Okay, so yeah, we're not into the flange area, so that'll help. That'll help keep it together as far as flexing when we weld it up. So okay, cool. All right, well, good deal. So we'll get that one out. That's the last one out. We might as well take that with us here. We'll leave this here. All right, Mike, here's our block. Now we need a verdict on the bore. We're good for cracks, so.
Overall, it looks pretty good compared to a few of the projects that you brung me.
Yeah, this one doesn't have big rust holes or.
Yeah, I would say it's probably got 4,000 or 5,000 wear, but do it right,
Okay.
we'll end up doing it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I had with a quick check as far as size, down low. It's got a little egg to it. Using a comparator in there, it had a little egg top to bottom, and around it. The ridge here is
Pretty minimum.
Yeah, it's not. I've seen a whole lot worse. It is interesting, just as you feel it. It's heavier on the bottom than it is the top. G and a V, wears that way, but.
And sometimes you'll even get it where it's on the sides are actually even higher because the rod, you're kind of forcing against it. So sometimes it'll wear, you'll know if it's a crooked bore or not.
Right.
But yeah, it looks actually pretty decent.
All right.
I think we can do something with that.
So one thing I know you, and I'm going to stay way over here because I know I'm out of your reach. We want to deck the bore, or deck the top of the block, right? Well, in standard GM fashion, numbers are stamped over here on this side, so.
That could be a challenge.
I know you love doing those, but
Yeah, we'll see what
we'll
we
need
can
to
do.
stop short of the pad.
Right.
All right, sweet. Now, I think you have some rod bolts for me, and I know you have other stuff to get done, so can you set me up show me how to press out piston rods or piston pins, and then I'll do that and get them ready for you to hone out and
Sounds good.
recon the rods.
We'll do.
All right. All right, so part of doing reconditioning the stock rods is to replace the stock bolts and put some new bolts in them. And when you do that, you want to also resize the big end. And to do that, you go through and what's referred to as clip the cap. So basically grind this cap, and it takes just a hair off of it. So if you will, this hole is no longer round, it is egg-shaped, meaning it's shorter this way. So now, but that gives you meat to go into the hone and hone them back out to size. So with the caps done, the bolts in, now I'm gonna go and torque these rods down, and then Mike will go through and resize that. And then our rods will be ready, with exception of doing a little more cleanup on them, but they'll be ready to be assembled into the pistons when they get here. So that's that. All right, well, Mike's got the rods are all done. The big end's resized. Now, just to clarify, so the idea is this diameter has to be the same size. So unlike the bore in the engine where you actually make the bore larger and get pistons larger, you can't get bearing shells that are larger. So what you do is you shorten up the distance, if you will, on the cap side by just a small amount, and then you can basically remachine this with the hone, and you hone it back to the exact size that it needs to be. So you're basically making it smaller to make it bigger again, and that's how you recondition the large ends. Well, with that, rods are done, the block is sitting, it's ready to go. We're waiting for the pistons and the bearings so we can move on, and then likewise for some time relative to the heads. So for today, that's the end of it here at Thirlby's. The next time we'll be over here doing the block and the heads. And that's kind of about it. This will be a wrap for this time. And so like always, get out in the shop, get your work done. And if you don't have a project, that means you're not trying hard enough, because you need to go buy another one. I mean, what the heck, right? So see you next time.